The Deadly Whisper. The Palace of Stars was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. The ceilings were made of moving nebulae, and the floors were crafted from diamonds. Tonight, the Great Galactic Gala was in full swing. Thousands of alien species from across the universe were there. Some had 4 arms, some were made of glowing gas, and others were tall, scaly creatures with multiple eyes. Among this crowd of powerful beings, no one noticed the man in the gray uniform. His name was Arthur. To everyone else, he was just a cleaner, a simple servant responsible for picking up empty glass cups and wiping spills. He moved quietly, his head down, never making eye contact. In this galaxy, being a human was like being a ghost. Most alien races believed that humans were extinct, or perhaps they were just a weak, primitive species that had died out 1,000 years ago. Arthur liked it that way. Being invisible was his greatest strength. Inside his ear, a tiny device clicked. A voice whispered, "Arthur, status report. Do you have the data core?" Arthur didn't move his lips. He tapped his cleaning cloth twice. He was standing near the central computer terminal, hidden behind a large golden statue. His mission was simple: steal the digital map of the Forbidden Sector, and get out. If he failed, the last hidden colony of humanity would be discovered and destroyed. "The guards are rotating in 60 seconds, the voice in his ear said. "Move now." Arthur moved with the grace of a shadow. He reached the terminal and plugged in a small, black chip. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. On the screen, numbers began to fly by. 40%. 60%. 80%. Suddenly, the loud music in the ballroom stopped. A heavy silence fell over the room. Arthur froze. He didn't turn around, but he could feel the temperature in the room drop. The hundreds of aliens in the room all bowed their heads. The Queen had entered. Queen Zara was the ruler of the Valerian Empire, the most powerful force in the known universe. She was 7 feet tall, with skin that looked like silver and eyes that glowed like blue stars. She didn't walk, she seemed to glide across the floor. Her power was so great that she could crush a ship with a single thought. Arthur kept his back to the room, pretending to polish the wall. Just a few more seconds, he thought. Please, just 5 more seconds. The data chip turned green. 100%. Done. Arthur quickly pulled the chip out and hid it in his sleeve. He began to walk away, trying to blend into the shadows of the hallway. He thought he was safe. He thought he was still invisible. But then, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. Arthur's blood turned to ice. He stopped. He didn't look up, but he could see the silver hem of a royal dress. The Queen was standing right behind him. The most powerful woman in the galaxy was touching a lowly servant. The entire ballroom was watching in shock. Why would the Queen stop for a cleaner? Queen Zara leaned down. Her long, silver hair brushed against Arthur's neck. She leaned into his ear, her breath smelling like ozone and ancient stars. In a voice so quiet that only Arthur could hear, she whispered. "I know who you are, human. And I know why you are really here." Arthur's eyes widened. His secret, the secret of his entire race, had been shattered in a single second. He felt a sharp sting of fear. For 1,000 years, humans had hidden in the dark, pretending to be gone. And now, he had been caught by the one person who could destroy them all. The Queen pulled back and looked him in the eyes. She didn't look angry. She had a strange, playful smile on her face, like a cat watching a mouse. She didn't call the guards. She didn't scream. She simply patted his shoulder and walked away, her long cape flowing behind her. Arthur stood there, paralyzed. For a moment, he thought he might be able to run. But then, the Queen reached the center of the room and turned around. She looked at her elite royal guards, monsters in heavy armor with laser spears. She pointed a finger toward Arthur. "The servant," she said loudly, her voice echoing through the hall. "He has stolen something precious from me. Bring him to the interrogation chamber. Alive, for now." The music started again, but it was dark and fast. The royal guards turned their heads toward Arthur. Their red eyes locked onto him. Arthur looked at the exit, then at the guards. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and millions of miles away from home. His cover was blown. The hunt had begun. The ghost in the machine. The circle of royal guards closed in on Arthur, their heavy metal boots echoing against the diamond floor. Each guard was a towering beast with 4 arms and skin as hard as rock. They looked at Arthur with contempt, seeing only a small, fragile creature in a servant's uniform. To them, a human was nothing more than a myth, a weak animal that should have stayed dead. But as the guards raised their energy spears, Arthur's mind went into a state that no alien in the galaxy could understand: adrenaline. While the aliens relied on their advanced sensors and heavy armor, Arthur's human brain began calculating paths, speeds, and weaknesses at a rate that surpassed their computers. Just as the first guard reached out to grab him, Arthur moved. He didn't run away, he moved inward. He slid under the guard's massive legs and reached for a small, cylindrical object hidden in his utility belt. It wasn't a high-tech laser or a plasma bomb. It was a simple, ancient human invention, a high-intensity magnesium flashbang. With a sharp click, he dropped it. A blinding, white light exploded in the center of the ballroom. The aliens, whose eyes were tuned to the soft, dim light of deep space, screamed in pain as their sensitive retinas were scorched. In the chaos, Arthur didn't just run, he moved with a predatory grace that humans had perfected over thousands of years of survival. He sprinted toward the high balcony, his lungs burning but his legs pushing harder. In the galaxy, humans were known for one thing that everyone had forgotten: endurance. While other races were stronger or faster in short bursts, a human could keep running long after an alien's heart would give out. Arthur leapt over a decorative railing, falling 30 feet into the palace gardens below. He landed in a roll, absorbing the impact, and disappeared into the glowing blue flora. Behind him, he could hear the confused shouts of the guards and the alarm sirens wailing across the capital city. He had the data chip, but he knew he couldn't leave yet. The Queen's words haunted him: she didn't just find him, she was waiting for him. As he moved through the shadows of the garden, a holographic screen flickered to life on a nearby fountain. It wasn't a public broadcast, it was a private channel. The image of Queen Zara appeared, sitting calmly on her throne, watching the chaos on a monitor. "You run well, little ghost," she said, her voice smooth and chilling. "My guards think you are a thief, but I know the truth. You are a scout for the Lost Fleet. You think you are hiding from the universe, but the universe has been looking for you for a long time." Arthur stopped in his tracks, his hand hovering over his hidden blade. He realized now that the gala wasn't just a party, it was a trap designed specifically to pull a human out of the shadows. Suddenly, the ground beneath Arthur's feet began to vibrate. A hidden trapdoor opened, and he slid down a smooth, metallic chute before he could react. He tumbled into a dark, cold chamber deep beneath the palace. The air here was different, it smelled like old metal and dry earth. As the lights flickered on, Arthur gasps. The room wasn't filled with alien technology. Instead, the walls were lined with ancient human weapons, dusty space suits with the United Earth flag, and a massive, rusted ship that looked like it belonged in a museum. This was a secret vault, a collection of human history kept by the Queen herself. At the far end of the room, the Queen was waiting for him, standing next to a glass case that held a very specific item, a golden key with the coordinates of Earth's last hidden base. She looked at Arthur not with hatred, but with a terrifying hunger. "Your people didn't go extinct because you were weak, Arthur," she whispered, stepping closer until she was inches away from him. "You went away because you were too dangerous to stay. But now, a new enemy is coming, one that even my empire cannot stop. I didn't capture you to kill you. I captured you because I need the monsters of Earth to wake up and fight once more. Arthur looked at the ancient ship, then at the Queen. He realized that his mission had just changed from a simple theft to something much bigger. He wasn't just a spy anymore, he was the key to a war that would decide the fate of every living soul in the galaxy. But before he could speak, the ceiling of the vault groaned. A massive explosion rocked the palace above. The swarm, the enemy the Queen feared, had arrived earlier than expected. The hunt was over, and the war for the galaxy had just begun at the doorstep of humanity's greatest secret. The shadow of the swarm. The explosion above was not like a normal bomb. It was a wet, heavy thud that made the entire planet of Valerian tremble. Dust and silver debris fell from the ceiling of the secret vault. Arthur looked up and saw the monitors flickering. The beautiful sky of the palace, which was once filled with stars, was now covered by a thick, oily black cloud. This was the swarm. They were not ships made of metal, they were living creatures the size of buildings, traveling through space to eat entire civilizations. The Queen's face, usually so calm and cold, turned pale. For the first time, Arthur saw true terror in the eyes of the most powerful woman in the universe. She turned to the monitors and whispered, "They found us. My shields, they are eating my shields." Arthur didn't wait for her to finish. His human instincts, sharpened by years of training for this exact moment, kicked in. While the Queen was frozen in fear, Arthur ran toward the ancient human ship in the center of the room. It was called the Vanguard. It looked like a giant, sharp needle made of dark iron. Unlike the glowing, elegant alien ships, this one looked angry and industrial. It was built for one thing only, war. "If you want to live, you need to help me power this up," Arthur shouted, his voice snapping the Queen out of her shock. She looked at him, confused. "That ship is 1,000 years old, human. It is a relic. It belongs in a museum, not a battlefield." "In my culture," Arthur replied as he ripped a dusty cover off a control panel, "we have a saying, they don't make them like they used to. Your technology is based on light and energy. The swarm eats energy. But this ship? This ship runs on old-fashioned fire and cold steel. They can't eat what they can't touch." He began punching buttons, his fingers moving faster than the Queen's eyes could follow. Deep inside the floor, a massive engine began to growl. It was a sound the galaxy hadn't heard in centuries, the roar of a nuclear fusion heart waking up. The ground shook again, but this time, it was because of the human machine. Suddenly, the heavy vault doors began to melt. A strange, orange liquid seeped through the cracks. Then, with a horrific screech, the metal was torn apart like paper. 3 creatures entered the room. They looked like giant spiders made of black glass, with hundreds of red eyes and blades for legs. These were the soldiers of the swarm. They ignored the Queen and focused all their red eyes on Arthur. They sensed the human energy, the one thing they had been told to fear. One of the creatures leapt through the air, its blades ready to cut Arthur in half. Arthur didn't even look up from the console. He reached into a locker on the side of the ship and pulled out a heavy, black metal tube. It was an ancient human shotgun. He pointed it at the leaping creature and pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening, a loud boom that echoed through the chamber. A cloud of lead pellets hit the creature, shattering its glass body into a million pieces. The Queen gasped, covering her ears. She had never seen a weapon that used physical force instead of lasers. The other 2 creatures hesitated. They were used to energy shields and light guns, but they had no defense against a piece of metal flying at 3 times the speed of sound. "Get on the ship. Now!" Arthur yelled at the Queen. She didn't argue this time. She ran up the ramp just as more swarm creatures began pouring into the vault. Arthur slammed the door shut and jumped into the pilot's seat. The screens came to life, showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots were everywhere, the swarm was attacking every major planet at once. But in a dark corner of the map, a single blue dot was blinking. It was the Protocol Zero location. The secret home of the humans. As the Vanguard blasted out of the palace, tearing through the roof and flying into the smoky sky, Arthur looked at the view screen. The beautiful city was burning. Thousands of alien ships were falling from the sky like dead flies. The swarm was winning. The Queen sat next to him, her hands trembling as she watched her empire crumble. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small. Arthur gripped the controls, his eyes fixed on the blue dot. "We are going to the only place that is still safe," Arthur said, his voice cold and determined. "But to get there, we have to fight our way through their entire fleet. I hope you're ready, Queen. You're about to see why humans were the monsters in your bedtime stories." The Vanguard tore through the upper clouds of the planet Valerian like a spear made of fire. Outside the thick glass windows, the view was horrifying. The sky was no longer blue. It was filled with thousands of swarm hunters, living ships that looked like giant, flying insects with glowing purple bellies. These creatures were busy catching the elegant, silver ships of the Queen's royal fleet. The alien ships tried to fire their beautiful blue lasers, but the swarms simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger. It was a slaughter. Queen Zara watched from the co-pilot's seat, her breath shaking. She tried to use her mind link to call for help, but her golden crown, the device that allowed her to control her empire, was dead. "The swarm has a dampening field," she whispered, her voice full of despair. "Nothing electronic can work near them. My ships are just floating metal coffins now. We are going to die." Arthur didn't look at her. His hands were busy flipping heavy metal switches and pulling levers. Unlike the Queen's ships, which were controlled by thoughts and light, the Vanguard was a machine of wires, oil, and physical gears. "Your ships are too smart for their own good, Queen," Arthur said, his voice calm but loud over the roar of the engine. "You built a galaxy of glass. We built ours of iron. The swarm can jam a signal, but they can't jam a physical wire. They can't stop a human who knows how to fly by hand." He grabbed a large joystick and slammed it forward. The ship groaned, and the Queen was pushed back into her seat by a force she had never felt. In the galaxy, inertial dampeners made space travel feel like sitting in a room. But on a human ship, you felt every bit of the speed. Suddenly, four swarm hunters noticed the lone iron ship and dived toward them. They opened their mouths to fire bursts of concentrated energy. "Brace yourself," Arthur yelled. Instead of activating an energy shield, he pressed a red button labeled Chaff and Flare. Thousands of small, burning metal fragments shot out of the back of the ship. The swarm's energy bolts hit the metal scraps and exploded harmlessly in the air. The Queen's eyes went wide. She had never seen such a primitive, but effective defense. Before the creatures could react, Arthur pulled another lever. On the wings of the Vanguard, two massive barrels extended. These weren't laser cannons. These were ancient railguns. With a sound like a thunderclap, the ship shook. Two solid slugs of tungsten metal shot out at 10 times the speed of sound. They didn't hit the swarm ships with light, they hit them with raw, physical mass. The first swarm hunter didn't just explode, it was completely shattered, its glass-like body turning into dust. The second slug went right through two more creatures, leaving giant holes in their chests. The Queen stood up, ignoring the way the ship was vibrating. They can't absorb it," she breathed in shock. "It's just a rock. You are killing them with fast rocks." Arthur gave a small, grim smile. "Physics is a beautiful thing, isn't it?" But the victory was short-lived. As they cleared the atmosphere and entered the black void of space, the true scale of the invasion became clear. A massive swarm hive ship, the size of a small moon, was waiting in orbit. It was surrounded by millions of smaller creatures, forming a living wall between Arthur and the jump point to safety. The Queen's hope vanished again. "There are too many," she said, her voice breaking. "Even with your rocks, we cannot get through that many. We should turn back." Arthur didn't turn back. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the data chip he had stolen from the Gala. He plugged it into the dashboard. A countdown appeared on the screen, and a voice, a human voice, deep and robotic, spoke, "Targeting system engaged. Relaying coordinates to the Ghost Fleet." Arthur looked at the Queen, his expression serious. "I told you I was here on a mission. That data chip wasn't just a map. It was a beacon. I didn't just come here to steal your secrets, Queen. I came here to see if the galaxy was worth saving. And more importantly, I came to give the signal." Suddenly, the space behind the Vanguard began to ripple and tear. It wasn't the smooth, quiet jump of an alien warp drive. It was a violent, loud crack that sounded like the universe was being ripped apart. Out of the darkness, dozens of massive shadows began to emerge. They were blocky, ugly, and covered in heavy armor plating. These were the ghost ships of humanity, the secret army that had been hiding in the dark for a millennium. They didn't have lights or decorations. They only had guns. Arthur gripped the controls and looked at the massive hive ship ahead. "Now," he said, his voice cold. "Let's see if your swarm can eat a real human war." The void of space, which was usually silent and cold, was now screaming with the sound of tearing dimensions. Behind the Vanguard, the Ghost Fleet of humanity continued to emerge from the shadows. These ships did not look like the elegant, bird-like vessels of the Valerian Empire. They were massive, blocky slabs of dark, scarred metal. They had no windows, no glowing lights, and no decorative wings. They looked like floating mountains of iron, built for the sole purpose of surviving the end of the world. Queen Zara stood frozen at the window of Arthur's ship, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and pure terror. She had spent her entire life believing her empire was the pinnacle of civilization, but looking at these human dreadnoughts, she felt like a child looking at a god. "They are so silent," she whispered. "Why are there no lights on their ships?" Arthur didn't turn his head. "Because in the dark, the one who is seen first is the one who dies first. Humans don't build ships to be beautiful, Queen. We build them to be invisible until it's too late." The swarm hive ship, a biological monster the size of a moon, roared in a frequency that vibrated through the hulls of every ship in the system. It sensed the new arrivals and redirected its millions of insect-like fighters toward the human fleet. A black wave of swarm creatures, looking like a literal ocean of teeth and claws, rushed toward the lead human ship, the USS Retribution. The Queen closed her eyes, expecting the human ship to be torn apart in seconds. But the humans didn't fire lasers. They didn't raise glowing shields. Instead, the entire surface of the USS Retribution began to spin. Thousands of small, automated turrets popped out from the armor plating. These were point defense cannons, and they began to fire millions of rounds of depleted uranium. A wall of lead and fire filled the space between the ships. The swarm creatures didn't just die, they were turned into a red mist before they could even get close. The Queen watched in stunned silence as the ocean of the swarm crashed against the cliff of human steel and shattered. "You are not using energy," she realized, her voice trembling. "The swarm is starving because you are giving them nothing to eat. No shields to drain, no lasers to absorb. Just cold, dead metal." Arthur nodded, his hands steady on the controls. "That's the secret. The galaxy grew soft, Queen. You all relied on clean energy and smart tech. We stayed in the dirt. We kept our gunpowder dry. We knew that one day, the universe would send something that eats light. And we decided to be the ones who bring the dark." But the battle was far from over. The hive ship, seeing its scouts destroyed, began to open its massive central maw. A dark, purple glow began to build up inside it, a planetary devastator, beam that could crack a world in half. "Arthur! The hive ship is charging its main weapon," the Queen screamed, pointing at the glowing purple light. "If that beam hits your fleet, even iron won't save you." Arthur looked at the sensor screen. A small red that was blinking, a message from the flagship of the Ghost Fleet. It was a single word, Anvil. Arthur's face went grim. He grabbed the Queen's shoulder and pushed her back into the seat. Hold on to something. It's about to get very heavy in here. Suddenly, 3 of the largest human ships moved forward, ignoring the swarm fighters. They didn't fire their guns. Instead, they began to accelerate at impossible speeds, aiming directly for the hive ship's open mouth. They weren't going to shoot, they were going to ram it. The Queen watched as the 3 human ships turned into streaks of white light. Just as the hive ship fired its purple beam, the human ships activated their gravity anchors. The space around the hive ship began to warp and fold. The purple beam was twisted and bent back into the hive ship's own throat. The explosion was so bright that it blinded the Queen for a moment. When she could see again, the front of the hive ship was a burning wreck. But the human ships weren't finished. They began to launch pod drops, thousands of small, armored coffins that shot toward the hive ship's surface. "What are those?" the Queen asked. Arthur gripped the joystick, his eyes burning with a dark pride. "Those are the boarding parties." The ships broke the door down. Now, the infantry is going inside to kill the heart of the hive. This isn't just a space battle anymore, Queen. This is a house cleaning. The Queen sat back, her mind racing. She realized that for 1,000 years, the galaxy had been afraid of the wrong things. They were afraid of black holes, of supernovas, and of the swarm. But they should have been afraid of the quiet species that lived in the shadows. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were scared. They had been hiding because they were the only ones who knew how to truly hate an enemy. As she looked at Arthur, the cleaner she had tried to arrest, she saw the face of a race that would never be conquered. The suspense was now at its peak. The hive ship was dying, but it was spinning out of control, heading directly toward the Valyrian capital planet. If it crashed, billions would die. Arthur looked at the Queen and then at the burning hive ship. "We have to go inside," he said. "We have to steer that monster away before it hits your home." The air inside the swarm hive ship was thick, hot, and smelled like rotting metal. The Vanguard had crashed directly into the brain room of the massive biological monster. Arthur and Queen Zara stepped out of the ship, their boots splashing in a pool of purple liquid. The walls were alive, pulsing like a giant heart. In the center of the room stood the Swarm Queen, a terrifying creature of black glass and glowing veins, her many legs clicking against the floor. She didn't speak with words, she spoke directly into their minds. "Why do you fight, little mammal?" her voice hissed in their brains. "Your galaxy is old and weak. These aliens you protect are fragile. They would have forgotten you if I hadn't arrived. Join me, and we shall consume the stars together." Queen Zara fell to her knees, her mind unable to handle the psychic pressure of the Swarm Queen's power. But Arthur stood tall. His jaw was set, and his eyes were cold. He pulled a small, silver locket from under his uniform, an old human relic. "You're right," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the wet chamber. "The galaxy did forget us. They thought we were gone. But humans don't protect others because we are good. We protect them because we choose to. And we don't like it when someone messes with our choices." He didn't use a laser or a bomb. He pulled out a simple, old-fashioned mechanical detonator. It was connected to the Vanguard's fusion core. He wasn't just going to kill the Swarm Queen, he was going to turn the entire hive ship into a miniature sun. The Swarm Queen screamed, a sound that cracked the glass walls of the room. She realized too late that the human wasn't there to negotiate or to win a war, he was there to finish it. Arthur looked at Queen Zara and grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the Vanguard. "I've set the ship to overload. We have 3 minutes to steer this monster away from your planet and get to the escape pods." As the hive ship groaned and began to tilt, Arthur grabbed the organic control nerves of the creature. He used his bare hands to pull and tear at the pulsing veins, forcing the massive hive ship to turn its nose away from the Valyrian capital and head toward the empty void of space. The heat was becoming unbearable. The hive ship was melting from the inside out. Arthur pushed Queen Zara into a small, experimental human escape pod at the back of his ship. "What about you?" she cried, grabbing his hand. "You can't stay here. The explosion will be too big." Arthur gave her a small, sad smile, the first real smile she had seen on his face. "Someone has to hold the wheel until the end, Queen. That's the human way. We stay behind so the others can go home." He slammed the pod's door and hit the launch button. The Queen watched through the pod's window as she was shot out into space, leaving Arthur alone in the heart of the dying monster. A few seconds later, the dark sky of the galaxy was lit up by a flash of light so bright it looked like a second sun had been born. The hive ship vanished in a silent, beautiful explosion of fire and metal. The swarm fleet, now without their queen's psychic command, began to drift and die, becoming nothing more than space dust. The battle was over. The galaxy was saved. Queen Zara's pod was picked up by her surviving royal guards. She stood on the deck of her command ship, looking at the spot where Arthur had disappeared. Her ministers and generals were cheering, celebrating their victory, but the Queen remained silent. She looked at the giant, ghost ships of humanity, which were now slowly turning around and fading back into the darkness of the forbidden sector. They didn't stay for a parade. They didn't ask for a reward. They simply vanished as quickly as they had arrived. Queen Zara looked at her reflection in the glass, remembering the whisper in her ear at the gala. She realized that the humans were not the weak race the history books described. They were the guardians of the galaxy, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the moment they were needed most. She turned to her generals and said, "Record this day in every book. Tell the universe that the humans are not ghosts. They are the fire that keeps the dark away. And pray we never give them a reason to come back as our enemies." In the distance, a single, tiny light flickered and disappeared. Arthur was gone, but the legend of humanity had just begun.